It being Tuesday at 5:35 p.m. Let's begin the meeting of the Committee on Community Planning. Welcome, everybody. All votes will be by roll call because we have someone who participated remotely. And Clerk Tamino, can we start with a roll call, please?
Councillor Maglio.
Here.
Councillor O'Brien.
Present.
Councillor Reynolds. All present.
Excellent. So should we approve the minutes, or is that something that we should?
You and I had a discussion that
Yeah.
you wanted to table it. So
Yes.
let's table it and have our further discussion.
Okay, can I explain
Certainly.
why? Okay, so on here is a mention of a motion to approve the minutes. So I had typed out an actual transcript, which is a little much. It's about 16 or 17 pages from the last meeting. And thinking from the transcript, we could shorten that down and actually have much more focused meeting minutes. So I'd like to table.
Just a few revisions.
Yes, okay. So let us move on.
We just need something to table that. If that's okay.
Motion to table.
Thank you.
Second.
And Councillor Maglio. This is a roll call vote. Councillor O'Brien.
Aye.
Councillor Reynolds.
Aye.
In favor, 0 opposed. Thank you.
Okay, so very excited to have our guests here tonight, our experts. The first issue is with regard to follow up on the MBTA, and the main issue really is to follow up on the MBTA communities. We had a conversation at the last meeting, and we decided let's get the experts in to give us a presentation. And so, would anyone from the mayor's office like to speak up?
So Crystal, why don't you, Crystal's gonna kind of just go like a quick of what we're planning to do this evening for those in person and those that's joining us at home. Crystal's gonna just do a quick overview of the regulations. We've provided hard copies of the updated regulations. Those were issued, I believe it was October 31st, or excuse me, 21st of this year. So there have been some changes since we made our presentation at the council in the spring. And we are currently in compliance. I filed all the required paperwork in the spring. And then as we get a little further, I have some maps and also a draft of the action form that we'll review with the committee, and then we can answer any questions. Okay, great.
So if I may, Councilor Maglio? Okay. Good evening, everyone. For those of you who are on Zoom, my name is Crystal Huff. I'm the Assistant Town Solicitor for the town of Braintree, and I happen to work closely with the Department of Planning and Community Development on all these projects. So, as we know, MBTA communities has been featured prominently in the news and in the newspapers recently. And there's been a lot of talk about it. That it's made some pretty broad changes to, it's going to require some pretty broad changes to what we do on a local zoning level. This has been instituted, from the state down to local communities. The state has mandated that local communities zone for multifamily housing districts as of right within a certain distance of certain MBTA stations. And the state had previously issued draft guidance on this law. This is from, and we went over that previously with the council. We met, and now that they have issued the final guidance, our understanding of that has changed somewhat. However, as it applies to Braintree, nothing has changed significantly. Our understanding of that is still pretty close to what we had discussed previously. Under the new law, and Braintree is designated an MBTA community. It's classified as a rapid transit community. That's a special category, and that's related to the access to the red line that it has. And under that, the law has required that Braintree have a district of reasonable size that allows multifamily housing as of right that are suitable for families. And what that means, what the new guidelines have stated that means is that that Braintree has to zone for 25% of its current housing units, which works out to being 3,769 units was what we have to zone for in a district that is as of right within a half a mile of one of our two transit hubs. So we have the Red Line stop, and we also have the Green Bush line. And then the new guidance is further refined that. And it's given us a 50-acre minimum land area that we have to put that on. And it also says that only 50% of that has to be within the half mile of the station. So that allows the planning and community development department some flexibility as the next year goes on, to look at like where is the best fit for some of these zones that are being mandated by the state. And that's basically where we're at right now. They set forth some timelines for us to work on. They're pretty close to what they were before. I don't believe that the timelines have changed at all. And we have interim compliance at the moment, which is great. It keeps us eligible for these really important grants that we've been getting. In fact, we actually received one of these grants, so it's been very critical that we've kept up our interim compliance. And I'm going to turn it over to Melissa for sort of the specifics of what exactly we're doing.
I'm sorry, I just
Sure.
wanted to ask one. I didn't quite catch again.
Yeah.
Was it 50 acres minimum land use, but only 50% needs to be in the half mile?
That's correct. So we
Okay.
have to have a minimum. We have to have 50% of whatever size district we create within the half a mile. So the state is saying we have to have a minimum of 50 acres. We can have an area that's larger than that,
Right.
but half of that area, even if it's, so I don't want you to think it's a minimum of 25 acres. It could be more if our district is larger, but 50% of that has to be within that. So,
And does it need to be contiguous to, like, where if you're drawing a circle, does it need to, or can it be?
well, I think this is something, so Melissa's going to explain. I don't want to steal her thunder, but we've received some technical assistance, and these are things that we're all going to work out over the next year with the technical assistance that we're getting from the state. So
I've got 3 copies of the landing. Do you have any one of the?
there's one right there. There's a
So I have 3 of these.
I did piles because I wasn't sure who printed what, so.
So I'll take one of these.
Thank
They
you.
were not right.
designated towards this specific.
And then I have these as well. Should we
Yeah,
be looking at
I'm
these?
gonna review those. Yep.
There you go.
So if I may, you do have 2 maps, this evening, also provided to the council clerk. As Crystal had mentioned, this map shows our half mile radius around the Red Line station. You can see a little blue box in the middle here. That's the actual garage. And then the second map is the Green Bush station. Again, this little green sliver, and showing the half mile radius. And I would just point out that this half mile has some intrusion by water and also by another community. So that half mile actually encompasses Weymouth and quite a bit of the Fall River area as well.
But Weymouth and the water would be excluded from the land that would be under consideration from us.
So for this circle, is this is a 50-acre circle?
No. These are half mile radiuses.
Oh, both of these are half.
These are both half mile radiuses. None of the things that I'm describing this evening gets to the acreage level. I'll talk about that a little bit, but I don't have maps.
Okay.
If I may just,
Yes.
I believe a half mile radius is 500 acres. So from what I understand.
So again, just for reference, I've provided these. What I am starting to do as part of some of my work product is I'm looking at and compiling parcels, looking at acreage and simple kind of description. The more acres you have, the less density. The less acres, the more density. Because again, these multipliers need to get to this 3769 number, which is what we need zoning to provide for. So for example, just using some rough numbers, if we did 20 units an acre, we'd be looking at 188 acres. If we did 25 units an acre, we'd be looking at 150. If we did 30 units an acre, we'd be looking at 125. So as the density goes up, the acreage goes down and vice versa. I am in the process of looking at parcels, looking at acreage, looking at things that would potentially be excluded, town, government, schools, things like that. There's a list of things that the state has determined that probably realistically would not become housing. And that's probably why they have excluded those, unless you can inform them of some development proposals or town goals that would in fact allow housing. Perfect example, Allen Street. So that is something that is in fact town owned, but it was made available, it's disposed, and it's locked up in a purchase and sales agreement. So
Right, so we can opt in with that parcel.
exactly. So Windjammer is it's within the half mile. I want people to be cautioned that, or not cautioned is the word, but talking about developments and how big they are isn't going to help at all in this, because we don't have, it had to be constructed by right. So all the special permits and all the tables that we have essentially negate the option to have any of those units be part of that number, because the zoning that is in place is not by right. Correct. So, and when I get into the action form, this will start to kind of make a little more sense. I did apply to the Mass Housing Partnership to receive technical assistance. We were awarded technical assistance, $20,000. We're going to be looking at scopes with the consultants. I think we're very fortunate. The consultant that they paired us up with is Eric Halverson of RKG, and he happens to be one of the members of our master plan team. So knows the town, has been involved, and is really coming in with a good baseline of the community, which I think will help in working with the consultant to put together. I think most of what we're probably going to be looking for help is the compliance model and the GIS side. I know enough GIS to be dangerous. We do not have a GIS person on staff at the town, so that is a skill set that we'll probably be looking to the consultant to help us with, to make sure that we produce all of the materials required to demonstrate compliance when we put together our district. So the main goal for this evening is the action form. I have filled this out in draft form. This is due January 31st, 2023. Submitting this is the next phase of compliance for the MBTA community requirements. And this will buy us compliance until, I think it's December 31st of 2024. Verify that.
Yeah, that's when we have to submit the next.
Is it
Yeah.
December 31st? I'm
believe-
getting
I believe
31st,
so.
21st.
It's just,
Yeah,
yeah.
December 31st, 2020. So, not to make things simple, but the action form is pretty straightforward. And what I'd like to do is sort of run through the questions. And if anybody has any questions, please stop me. First question, what's the name? Braintree. This is a drop-down menu that I will actually fill out appropriately, but for the purposes of this evening, I just wanted to provide something that we could all look at, not on a computer screen with me checking boxes. Your community category, as we had mentioned, we are a rapid transit community. Your multi-family unit capacity, again, the state has provided that. That's 25% of our year-round dwelling units, which gets us to 3,769. Next question, does the municipality have MBTA rapid transit stations within its boundaries? Obviously, the answer is yes. Then they ask us to name that, the Braintree Red Line Station. Next question, does this municipality have any MBTA commuter rail stations within the boundary? Obviously, yes. Next question, does this municipality have any other MBTA transit stations that are located outside of its municipal boundaries that may have developable station area within them? The answer to that is actually yes, and it's the Quincy Adams Station. We're all familiar with the location. It's right there on the line. Looking at that area, I did not print a map for that particular area. That's going to encompass, if you look at the station, you're going to grab Home Depot, then you're going to grab your off ramps, the highway, and it kind of just kisses Common Street. Going the other direction, it would be the last property in Braintree, which is already developed as residential under a special permit, and then the 3 comprehensive permits, which make up Independence Manor 1, 2, and 3, which is our senior affordable component. and then across the street, which is Archie's. So there's not much up in that area. We will be taking a deeper dive and looking at that. But nonetheless, that is one of the questions and something that we could in fact include as within a half mile of a transit. Next question, who's filling out this form? I'll be signing that with all my
I just want to
information.
add, but again, schools who are excluded from that, so Archie's
Yes.
is excluded.
Yeah.
Just,
Is there living at Archie's?
no,
So why would,
because they exclude public property and schools.
but just for the land area piece is excluded?
Yeah, we'll go over the exclusions. Why don't we go through the form and then we can go over the exclusions a little bit, just to clarify a few things. Briefly describe the members of the core team. So obviously myself, Crystal, Connor, and then the technical assistants. We kind of work as a team, and obviously then we'll have the help from our professional consultants. Does this municipality have any established housing related goals or strategies for municipal planning documents such as housing production master plan or economic development plan? The answer to that is, it could be yes, but the answer is it's really no. The second question, briefly describe any related strategies, goals, or objectives that have been done. I will put together a narrative that talks about us surplusing Allen Street for mixed income affordable project. I will talk about our efforts at Windjammer. We have an RFP out now for housing at 7490 Pond Street and also 85 Quincy Ave. So I'll put together a narrative about things that we have been doing locally in absence of a housing production plan. We're still making some pretty good efforts. I'll note in here our percentages and how we're getting very, very close to a safe harbor.
For under 40B.
Is this municipality currently working on other planning for housing? Yes. Briefly describe. I will describe our master plan and the process and where we are at in that stage with the fall completion date. And now section 3 gets into the preliminary zoning strategy. So the first question is an existing zone. Is there an existing zone that you believe already applies? The answer is no. We do not have a district that allows multifamily by right at 15 units in. The second thing is an existing zoning district or districts that must be amended to comply with section 3A guidelines. And the answer to that is yes. So currently the baseline density in the Braintree Landing District is 19 units an acre, but at the use of special permit. So looking at the landing, looking at changing the SP to a Y would be something, a simple fix. We've obviously demonstrated that housing is viable there. We have a few projects that have been very successful. We just permitted a recent one. The next question is a new 40R or other overlay zoning district. I answered yes to that. Not looking at 40R, but we could be looking at an MBTA overlay that will be superimposed in and around these various districts with potential of removing the excluded lands that are within these areas. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then I also checked off a new base zoning district. So overlays, base zoning districts, that's really what we're going to be looking at, especially around the red line, and augmenting the Braintree Weymouth Landing district is also a very viable option for us. It asks you to attach anything that you might think is compliant. You don't have that. I won't be attaching anything. And then it asks you if you selected this, this, and this. So there's a whole slew of other questions. So we selected B, which was augmenting an existing district. And the pagination got a little bit weird here, but I did try to check off use table, change the special permit to a Y in the use table, which I had just described. The second one, if you selected C, MBTA overlay around the MBTA red line station. D, also creating an alternate district, base zoning district, MBTA / highway business. Again, just trying to be descriptive. The name is really irrelevant. So there's multiple options for us, especially around the red line. And then I think the landing's gonna be a little bit cleaner because that zoning is newer. It was written to attract housing. It was written to promote mixed use, more compact design. So you can see sort of the difference between our very old zoning bylaw and how nothing jives. And then the newer section that was written in the last, I'd say, 11 years, 12 years, much more modern text is much easier to kind of flip. What non-housing characteristics are important for the community to consider? I will put together a narrative about the landing and how half of that is in Weymouth. We can't control any of the zoning in Weymouth. Obviously, the water. Crystal and I are talking about the landfill and the potential or lack of potential for that to support housing as well. So yes, yep. So we'll provide as much information as we can in that category. And then the last question is, tell us what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. So there will be a variety of activities to populate this, including public outreach, working with our technical assistance partners, drafting zoning, public hearings, all of those types of things that would go into a public planning process like this. And I'm probably looking to have that wrap up. I would say this is due in December. I don't like to go too close, but probably October, maybe early November. Obviously, need to look at the schedules of meetings.
2024.
23.
Yeah, 23.
Yes. Yep.
So, I mean, we have a fair amount of time to work on this. We know it'll go by fast, but you know, we certainly have sufficient time to, you know, to put in all the legwork that we've been discussing.
Yeah. And the technical assistance again is 20,000. They're looking for a 3 to 4 month project, and they want all the work done by June 30th. So we'll have a pretty good idea of, you know, who, what, when, how, all of that stuff. I would say by early summer. And that pretty much is what I was going to present. As far as the excluded, and again, in the handout, excluded land, means land areas on which it is not possible or practical to construct multifamily housing. For purposes of these guidelines, excluded land is defined by reference to the ownership, use codes, use restrictions, and hydrological characteristics in Mass GIS, and consists of the following. 1, all publicly owned land except for lots or portions of lots to be determined to be developable public land. Again, Allen Street, perfect example.
Things that we would get.
Number 2, rivers. I did. Yep. Maybe Member Reynolds took all 3.
2.
Yeah.
Overview.
Yeah, and I'm on page 3. Number 2, all rivers, streams, lakes, ponds, and other surface bodies. Again, I had mentioned on the landing, we have quite a bit of excluded. Number 3, all wetland resource areas together with a buffer zone around wetlands and water bodies equivalent to the minimum setback required by Title 5 of the State Environmental Code. Some applicability here. We don't do septic, so that's not applicable. Number 4, protected open space and recreational land that is legally protected in perpetuity. For example, land owned by a local land trust are subject to conservation restrictions, or that is likely to remain undeveloped due to functional or traditional, for example, cemeteries. So perfect example, Watson Park is obviously not going to be in a district that would support housing. Number 5, all public rights of way and private rights of way. So we're not going to be doing any calculating on streets. We would just be using parcels. That's a much neater and cleaner way. Number 6 is privately owned land on which development is prohibited to protect private or public water supplies, including but not limited to zone 1 wellhead protection and zone A surface water supply protection areas. And then the last one, which we touched on a little bit, number 7, privately owned land used for educational, institutional, hospital, prisons, electric, water, wastewater, or other utility, museum, or private school, college, and university. So an example in the landing would be like the NSTAR property. I mean, that's a public utility, not very likely to be surplus for housing. That probably even has an AUL on it. But So that's kind of where we're at, like in a snapshot. I continue to do my work product and piece things together and make sure that this times this equals 376, excuse me, 3,769.
Yeah.
And any questions that anybody has. I'm not trying to simplify it, but I think that this can get complicated because people want to make it complicated. But again, just looking at the form here, they're basically just asking you, where do you stand? What do you think you can do? And when are you going to do it by?
And we're in a very preliminary posture now. So as you know, I think as Melissa's gone over, you know, she's explained that over the summer, we're going to be getting to some more of the sort of the meat of the project when we have the opportunity to work with the technical assistance. And so again, right now we're just in a very preliminary space.
So that's fantastic because we certainly are not in a position to roll up our sleeves and get into anything deeper.
Yeah.
So that's
There has been, I just wanted to add one other thing. There has been a lot of articles. I'm not sure if anyone's seen the articles about there was actually a handful of communities that blew off the first round of compliance, and they're receiving letters that they're losing funding. And some of that funding is actually to the local housing authorities. Everyone knows their budgets. I've made some preliminary inquiries to see just how much money they actually get from these programs. So when I do get that information, I can share that with Sue. I think it's kind of important to understand, well, what do we use this money for? How much do we get? Is it meaningful? Is it no big deal? I think those are all important questions. Crystal had mentioned we did receive a Mass Works grant for Allen Street, and we need that money. So we will continue to work at this. I will be submitting this form well in advance of the deadline. I'm probably going to be talking to the consultant, I would say very shortly after the new year. And again, we'll be targeting work and work product and things from them that we can't physically do here due to staffing and constraints.
okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councilor Reynolds, do you have some questions?
Thank you, first of all, for this. I know I was concerned, and it's very assuring now to know that we are marching along and complying with the timelines. I was very concerned about a lack of compliance, if that was the case. And I'm very happy to hear that certainly wasn't the case. There was a lot of hard work that was going on. So thank you on that, and to the administration. But I know that there are opinions that have been shared in the past meeting of the Community Planning Committee about an interpretation that a build by right would one particular statement is that build by right is just going to blow away everything that Braintree has in place, and how about those poor folks who were living in single family neighborhoods that fell within that half-mile radius. And I try to assure them that those families and those homes and those properties will not be impacted by these changes and by these guidelines as they have been stated to achieve the desired outcomes of creating more multi-unit housing in the Boston area. And that it has to be available land, all right, and it has to comply with it as right, build as right versus a special permit. And so I want to make sure that I've got the proper response to put that kind of concern to rest and in the proper context.
I think, I mean, we're working out the details on this. So
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
still a little early to say where things are going.
Well, I'm not, all right, let me restate a little bit. I'm not looking for a definitive answer, but what I'm looking into is to allay the perhaps misunderstandings in terminology that get translated into fears of we're going to overdevelop this area, we're going to have 9-story buildings, etc. We're going to take away single family home zoned properties in order to accommodate the state's requirement. those are, shall I say, more of a, I want to make sure I'm very tactful in the words that I use here. I don't want to use a bit more stringent requirement that's being put on us, when in fact that level of that level described is certainly not what's being proposed here.
Well, what I can talk about is in my work product in the starting of compiling parcels, and I've been mostly focused on the red line to date. I've done a little more work in the landing, but not. There are no residential parcels in any of the parcels that I've started to inventory. I am not looking to go into neighborhoods or anything like that. I'm looking at things that are very linear, and properties that would in fact make sense for multifamily development. So there's no, I mean, I haven't even gone anywhere near a neighborhood or looking at anything. It's, you know, the circle is very big, and maybe that's what people think, because it does touch a lot. But I as the one who am starting to look at, okay, this area represents this. This is what this means for a density. Go bigger, the number goes down, go smaller. Does not include any parcels that are zoned Res A, B, or even C probably.
That makes perfect sense. And so I guess one way to really put it in a sentence, what are we going to say so that people aren't misled or people are not misunderstanding what the actual rules mean?
Okay.
Okay.
So, and again, kind of
straightforward.
Yep. So again, I'm looking at areas around the Red Line Station that are not in the Res A, B, or C zoning district. And also on the other side of town, looking at the landing. And again, we created a district 11 years ago with a baseline density of 19 units per acre. That use requires now a special permit. So changing the SP to a Y, we've already vetted this area for inclusion in this new district, VWLD, not new, but newer, that includes this already. So the only difference is it's the same areas. It actually might even be less areas when we start looking at the exclusions.
Sure.
But it's no different than the existing zoning district.
Okay. Could I follow one more question? So what, so
And this is
on the,
the map
on the table of
uses.
uses, in the areas that you have looked at, the parcels, the zoning, and the area in the table of uses where it is presently LP, okay? And if you had made reference to, there would be maybe an outside possibility that some of these properties that were presently or are presently on the use tables as special permit versus Y build by right, that they potentially could be changed in the future, and that could result in a benefit of our county.
Only in the landing though, because everywhere else in town, the baseline density is like 7 or 8 units an acre. So we can't just go from SP to Y, because the minimum density is not over.
It won't meet the
15.
minimum required by the statute.
Got you. By the statute,
Yes.
not by our, what is it? Our density tables.
No, it's by the statute requires a minimum of 15 units an acre.
Is it 714? No. What is that?
705.
705. Excuse me.
Minimum of 15 units an acre, or minimum acceptable density. And so what Melissa's saying, that the other districts other than the Braintree landing don't meet that minimum density standard as set forth in the statute.
Okay.
So that's simple. That's the simple answer to that one. That's why we focused on looking at the Braintree Weymouth landing district as something that we could convert into a compliant district.
That's that. All right. Thank you. That is very helpful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
One thing I did want to mention, Councilor O'Brien, I'm going to turn it over to you. There was a question that you had asked at the last meeting about, was there anything happening on the housing plan that was mentioned in the minutes? And so we sent that question forward and there wasn't. There is nothing sort of in the pipeline. So I just wanted to close the loop. Thanks to Sue and Melissa. And just turn it over to you. If you have any
Thank you,
questions.
Madam Chair. Appreciate that. So I just have a couple of questions. First of all, is there, well, so maybe I misunderstood, but I'm going to ask again. I think Crystal said that we have interim compliance. Does that simply just mean that we're aware of this and then are beginning the process and that equates to interim compliance?
Counselor O'Brien, we had to make some preliminary submissions, which we have made, and that is what has assured our interim compliance. And that's in part why we were eligible to receive the grant that we received for Allen Street.
Okay,
And we are going to keep our interim compliance with the next submission that Melissa is going to make, which is what she went over tonight.
okay, good, thank you. And I appreciate your effort on this. And then the other thing was relative to the 1885 units. That would be 50% of the 3769. I mean, I can do quick math in my head, just like Melissa can do better math in her head for this, but I mean, we're not even close to that number of units in some of these
So,
geographies.
Counselor, it's actually not, it's not the number of units, it's the land area that can be out, because you can have multiple districts with different densities.
Okay,
So it's not necessarily, it says that 50% of the land area. So if we throughout Braintree have 300 acres, 150 needs to be within the half mile. But that doesn't necessarily equate to half of the number, because there might be different densities depending on the area.
okay, thank you. That was a misunderstanding on my part. I appreciate that clarification. And then the last item I would say, just to kind of just as a reference point, not really anything major, but you know, every every tenth of a mile may make a difference. We do need to remember that we have 2 Greenbush stops, right? Because the Greenbush stop for the, I guess I'm going to call it Braintree Station, where the red line is across the street, across the highway. So I would think that would change the circumference of that half mile radius, because that's a second Greenbush stop.
There's only one Greenbush stop. Are you talking about the Plainville line?
Oh,
Isn't it Plainville?
no,
Middleborough?
Middleborough.
no, wait, it's Greenbush, the one that comes from through the landing.
Mhm.
It then stops at the Braintree Station across the street from the red line. It doesn't stop where the red line is. It's across the street behind the building right near to Function. That's where the actual stop is for the commuter rail.
That's the other line. That's the Middleborough
That's a
line,
different
respectfully. That's,
Oh,
I just, because I used to take, when I worked at a law firm in the city, I used to take the Greenbush line into work every day.
But wait a minute, so the Middleborough is the one that comes from the landing? No, it's the Greenbush.
No,
Right?
no,
They go in different spot. There's 2 different lines, Counselor O'Brien. There's one line that goes by the Braintree Red Line Station, which you pointed out, and then that goes onto Union Point in Weymouth. And then there's another line that goes from Hingham, Weymouth Landing, and then goes on into Quincy. And those are 2 different lines.
But it does stop in Braintree.
It does. Well, there's stops in the landing. The Greenbush line stops in the landing. It does not stop at the Red Line Station.
Oh,
A
but-
different commuter rail train line stops at the
Okay,
Red Line Station.
all
And
right,
then it goes on to Union Point in Weymouth.
all
So
right.
it's a little, I understand it's a little confusing objectively, because it seems like everything's so close together, but they are different lines. But your point is well taken, that we have that other station there, and perhaps that, that extra tenth of a mile there might be of value in calculating this. That's certainly something we're going to take into consideration.
Good. Just wanted to make sure, because so I've only taken it once. Actually, I've taken it twice, but the one time I took the landing, I wasn't paying attention maybe. So, but I thought it was Greenbush. We had to stop at the red line station because we actually had to transfer over to the T, but that was for another reason, but I just assumed that did it every day, but there you go. I've been corrected. All right, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Council O'Brien. One thing that I want to mention, I was on a webinar last night that was for the general public or municipalities, MBTA communities, and it focused on section 3A.
Yep, that's okay. Was it
So,
Chris Kochman?
yes.
They're like on autopilot, smiling the whole time. Yeah. I'm like, no, God, he's smiling.
Someone named me.
There was a,
And
yeah.
it was fantastic. And one of the visuals that you probably have, but I will also send what I have. They did a visual about the whole purpose of this is to focus on that mid-range of housing. It's, you know, they have this picture of single family homes and multi and then cute little duplexes and triplexes and
Yeah, we saw that. And they popped two out and put two more in and.
Yes, and so they're saying this whole, and that I thought was a really effective visual and could probably, definitely something I'm gonna circulate around because I think it could help people understand that the density that meets this requirement is density that's pretty pleasant and attractive and desirable.
Yeah, I think, you know, and I've got volumes and volumes of tables and what did we do here and how big is this and all different things that I've prepared over my tenure here. And looking sort of at those densities and really trying to look at a district that is compatible with our built environment and not something that's just like blows it out of the water. And it's, you know, it's interesting. Some communities will say, oh my God, this is terrible. And some communities will take the approach that I think Braintree should take, which is compatibility, context, continuity, harmony. And then some communities will use this as a tool. We want that gone. Let's zone this for some outrageous density that is going to incentivize redevelopment. So there's you can look at this as we hate it, it's a tool, or we can make this work.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we're kind of in the make it work scenario, unless there is a real strong push when we start looking and having some public input about really targeting some certain pieces. Because again, zoning it can incentivize development and redevelopment. So it's really kind of how do you want to use this section in your municipality.
Okay. I know that we have some people that are online, and if you would like to, if you have a question and you want to type it in the chat, I don't know if people can actually speak, depending on how they connected. And if you can speak, I will just ask that you very briefly ask your question. This is really designed to get information out.
Liz had her hand raised.
Hi, Liz.
Hi. Thank you for the info tonight. I have a couple of questions. My first question is, why is Boston excluded from this?
It's a question for your legislator.
Yeah.
That's not a question that we're capable of answering. Sorry.
Okay, for the record, I think that is something that everybody needs to keep in mind because it seems like we are being asked to bail Boston out. And I don't think that this is really fair to impose this on the communities surrounding Boston, and Boston is excluded.
Well, if just quickly, if I may, through the chair, Boston isn't subject to 40A. So 40A is our state zoning enabling act, and this is a section of that. They're not subject to 40A.
Okay.
That
Well,
might be why.
But again, this is
Share info.
respectfully, this is likely something that would be better answered by your state legislator. This is something completely out of our control.
Sure, I understand, but just for the record, I would like to go on the record and state that I think it is something that needs to be considered. And Okay, so I believe there are 51 communities that are being asked, or actually, I shouldn't say they're being asked, they're being forced by the state to change their zoning to comply with this. And, you know, I hear a lot of discussion about what will be taken away from us if we do not do this, if we do not comply, that if we do comply, then we have the ability to apply for loans and grants. So we will have 51 cities and towns applying to all these loans and grants, assuming that everyone complies. And I guess it's probably a pretty safe assumption when you put a stronghold around everybody and they pretty much have to do it. So what are we guaranteed to get at the end of the day? How much can the state afford to pay all these 51 cities and towns?
And that's not really, I can't answer that.
Yeah,
question.
I'm afraid, I'm sorry, ma'am, that's something that's beyond the scope of the discussion here tonight, or what we're really capable of answering. You know, I think, again, that might be a better question for your state legislator.
Okay, but for the record, because, you know, we're thinking about subjecting the town to this, I think that this is a question that the town needs to be looking into, because all of this development doesn't come without a price. Now, I understand that you will generate some revenue, but there are going to be a lot of services rendered for all of this residential development. So I think it behooves the town to understand what we will get out of this at the end of the day and what we will end up being responsible for bearing the burden of at the end of the day. So, you know, I understand that maybe you can't answer these questions, but I am asking that these issues are considered when this is something that the town is looking into.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And are there any other hands raised?
Yes.
If you could state your name, please, for the record, name and address.
Yeah, this is Dan Clifford, former town councilor, District 6, 265 St. Clair Street, Braintree. Through the chair to Melissa, or legal. Melissa, could you, for my edification, could you describe what that 40B is that you just mentioned before, or whatever the 40 was? 40R?
40A, chapter 40A. Is that what you're asking about, sir?
Describe it, Melissa, or legal.
It's called the Zoning Enabling Act, and that it's Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40A, and there's a number of sections in it, and it applies statewide with the exception of Boston, and sets forth kind of the parameters in which towns can enact local ordinances and bylaws to implement zoning.
All right. So you're saying it's 40 again, 40A.
Chapter 40A. Yep.
40A. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can take a look at that myself.
Yep. This is in particular what we're talking about. We're talking about Chapter 40A, Section 3A is the MBTA communities law.
All right. That's all I needed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. So we I guess we can, you know, kind of wrap this up by thanking you both for coming, and Connor as well, and thanking everybody for being here. This is helpful. This is informative. And I specifically would love for this committee to stay involved in the various steps that are happening. I think that there's other things on our agenda too that we want to look at, and we can talk about that. But certainly as far as this issue goes, we would like to kind of be involved in some way that is appropriate. Okay,
Motion,
I
motion, to-
will be, obviously completing the form that I presented this evening in draft format. And then once that's submitted, I can, share that with Sue as well, and so everybody can take a look. I mean, the narratives and those
Great.
sections, but, just putting forth our information so the state
Great.
kind of knows where we stand, and we'll continue to move forward.
excellent. Counselor O'Brien, did you have, yep, you have your hand up?
yep, I just want a motion to table 04122 to a future meeting as needed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Uh,
Oh, sorry, roll
Take a
call.
roll call.
Okay, Counselor Maglio,
Aye.
Counselor O'Brien,
Aye.
Counselor Reynolds,
Aye.
3 in favor, 0 opposed.
Excellent. And is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Counselor
Roll call.
Maglio,
Aye.
Counselor O'Brien,
Aye.
Counselor Reynolds,
Aye.
all in favor to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you for
very
coming.
much.